Hello, I'm Dr. Loren M. Hill, and I am your academic career coach. Today, I'm so happy to have with me Mr. Raymond Scott. Raymond is a finance whiz and has worked with a number of organizations regarding anything related to finance and budgeting. And Raymond and I actually met and worked together when I was at a major university. I was the department chair at that time and was tasked with going over my budget, doing forecasts, doing reconciliation, all of that. And so while I was familiar with it, I thought, you know what, I should probably go up to the finance office and meet with them and see how they can support me. And so Raymond and the rest of the staff in the finance office were very supportive. And so I thought it would be great to have someone come into the podcast and talk to us about that mysterious area of finance. So welcome, Raymond.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hill. It's actually, I really appreciate having this opportunity. And again, as you said, we did work together at a major university. And I will start off by saying the fact that you came and sought some advice or had questions from the finance department means a lot to those that work in finance. You know, we're often as seen as those guys or those gals, or, and that's that. But the fact that you took it upon yourself to come and talk to us about your department and your questions was really appreciated.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I should say that really I benefited from it, right? Okay, I'm an academician, I'm a scholar, I'm an administrator, but I'm not a finance whiz, right? So I'm not going to say that I was intimidated by the budget, but I certainly, there were some line items that I was confused about. And I didn't have someone come in and explain it to me, the former manager of the department. And so I was kind of left on my own. And I know that sometimes administrators or budget managers will inherit something and they will just try to figure it out because they don't want anybody to think they're not smart enough, right? So rather than muddling through it, I thought, you know what, there's a whole department up there. Let me go find out what they know and see how they can help me.
And again, I'll reiterate this, for your audience and anyone. If you are a budget owner and you have a finance tag, I don't know any finance tag that would not appreciate the budget owner coming to them. And the thing is, as a budget owner, you provide insight that the finance people don't have. For example, as you may have spoke earlier, just the understanding of where the revenue for an institution comes, that's admissions. But then there's costs in the department that the finance person will never have any idea about, whether or not you're bringing in a guest speaker or those kind of things. And that might be a line item in their budget, but it doesn't say guest speaker. It says, right. And so as a finance person, we might see it as, oh, that's the miscellaneous expense. Okay, as we're trying to meet this forecast and do this thing, well, we'll just cut down miscellaneous. And quite frankly, for some departments, that speaker is instrumental to the learning of the students in that department. And without talking to the department, you're a budget owner for that, the finance team may think that that's an area where they could potentially find some savings. And that's not true.
And so I know there's people who are probably in the audience going, wait a minute, Dr. Hill, budget, let me just swipe out of this. But I ask you to please hang in there with us, because if you are a faculty member or an administrator, or you're thinking about going into higher ed, I like to present a broad variety of what goes on in an institution. And the more you can know, the better informed you are. So as Raymond mentioned, we were having a conversation at another time talking about enrollment, right? So enrollment matters because enrollment equates to funding, right? So
correct.
if you don't meet your enrollment number, that will impact your department for years to come.
That is absolutely correct. You know, education in some ways or another is no different than any other business. For example, if you are a clothing store, you know, you make a product and you expect people to come in and purchase your product. And if you have that store, you'll have some products that perhaps sell more than other products. So when you're forecasting your following year, you're thinking, well, I need to carry more of this and that kind of thing. And so, and that goes in academia is very similar in regards to department, you know, curriculum, you know, programs and that kind of stuff. And the finance team really depend on those department chairs to help them understand, or, you know, the forecast. Okay, we expect to receive these number of students the following year. And that translates into, again, dollars and cents, you know, dollars, let's just say dollars. And if you know, and as a department chair or budget owner, you have plans for those dollars. You know, you have plans for those dollars. And if those dollars don't come in, you might need to understand why they don't come in, you know, and particularly, again, as you speak about enrollment is very, very important.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned the clothing store. I always tell people that academia, and more specifically higher ed, is a discipline. It's an industry, more specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we think of higher ed, academia as an industry, it's a little easier to kind of take out a product and fill in a product, or take out a consumer and fill in a consumer. And so how all of this will drive your money is important. So I know sometimes as faculty, you just show up, you teach your classes, and then you're like, I'm out of here, right? But you want to have a classroom that is filled, right? You don't want to have an empty classroom, because that means that there are some deficits along the way, which will impact resources, which will impact, you know, your ability to purchase things for your lab, and so on and so forth. So I think it is important for us to really make the connection that if this is an industry, there are certain things that drive industry. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I totally agree. And to even add, I mean, again, we're having a conversation, but to add some complexity to that, with higher ed being an industry, as all industries, there are competition. You know, there are competition. And often I find when I have discussions with particular people, you know, that's not even a concept. You know, the students have, you know, the students are our customers, and they have options and choices. And you know, getting back to the finance thing, we're not out there doing that, but we are looking for the department chair or department budget owners to tell us, particularly academia, how many students you think, you know, okay, you know, and you, it's important for you to understand your industry.
Yes. Yes.
You know, you know, it's important for you to understand your industry. And as you said, particularly in higher ed, it's everything's based on value. And so you have to know the value of your department, and even convince your own institution the value of your department to the institution.
Yes.
And, you know, and the finance can help you do that, you know.
Well, you bring up a great point about knowing your competitors, right? Because consumers have choices. And I'm reminded of a conversation that I had with someone else who is specializes in branding. And she said, it's not enough to just be good. You have to tell your story, because if you don't tell your story, then the consumers don't know that you're there, that you have this great product. So it's all interwoven, right? And so again, I think it's important, which is why I was so glad that you were able to come on and speak with us today, to talk about the money, right? It can be considered taboo, or, oh, they just handle it, or the money comes from the money fairy. I don't know where it comes from, but I just get a check, and then, you know, I get resources. And That's not how it works. It is a business. And so you want to be as informed as you can about the business of the money of the institution, your department. As a faculty member, your raises are all sort of, based on what comes in. It's not guaranteed, right? So I speak very passionately about this area, because I think if more people knew about it, just being informed, then they could be proactive about it.
I think that's a really, really great attitude about it. And often, I see people are intimidated by numbers or dollars and cents. And truthfully, it's a lot simpler than people think. I mean, for those of you that run departments or teach in higher ed, you have the intellectual capacity to clearly understand what your budget is.
Right.
I mean, there is no, I have no doubts. And hopefully when I work with you, Dr. Hill, you saw how I just always made it simple. I mean, it's like, look, it looks complicated because there's a whole bunch of line items and this and that, but it really isn't. I mean, there, quite frankly, in a lot of budgets, what sometimes people don't understand, there's some things that you need to know about it, but you have no say-so about it.
Right.
I mean, for example, you have a set of faculty, the faculty salaries are what they are. They're embedded in your budget. Okay, so that's not really something you have to spend a lot of time with. But it's some of those other stuff, whether you're going to have a guest speaker, how many test kits you need to order.
Yes.
I guess I need to prioritize the discretionary dollars is the language I would use. Right. And then if on some of the other things, for example, if a situation comes where you realize that you had planned to bring on a adjunct faculty, but your enrollment doesn't warrant it, but you budgeted for that adjunct faculty, well, those resources might be available for some of the other things that you thought you might have. Because, at the end of the year, you're awarded a certain amount of money to operate your department. And if you have put in there that you needed an adjunct faculty and you don't because of this or that, or maybe it's a change in curriculum, there's a lot of reasons. Well, those few $1,000s that you had budgeted for an adjunct faculty, oh, maybe this might be the opportunity to get that guest speaker. Right. And just being open to that and not being so afraid to really look at what was I awarded? What is my budget? How much of that is discretionary? And then let's move forward.
And you make a really good point, because in some ways we can, move things around.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Things are not sort of written in stone. Some things. So as you mentioned, maybe we were thinking about, having a guest, an adjunct faculty, but our numbers are down, so we don't really need that. We can move it over to a guest speaker, which the students might really enjoy.
Absolutely.
And using your funds in a way that now this is offering something different to the consumer, right?
Correct.
So that leads to consumer satisfaction.
Yes.
Then, reputation management. So it's really about being creative with what you have and not thinking of it as being so restricted.
Absolutely. And again, I'm gonna throw a plug for you. You understood that. and again, I will say this on record, when we worked together, reviewing your budget with you was absolutely wonderful because you understood. And again, even, my boss commented how well you understood the budget. You were always within less than 5% of whatever we forecast. And that's a testimony to you understanding your department, you understanding your environment, your competition, and really making it really easy for the finance team to provide you with, hey, this is your budget, this is what we, and you were really good at that. You understood it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I have to say that it really was, I was not a finance whiz and don't, think I am now. But again, it really was about just looking at it, just opening it up, looking at it, reading it. And for the areas that I was confused about or said, I don't know what this is, going up to the finance department and said, those are the folks who know what this is all about. So let me take them a cup of coffee and say, hey, this is my department. What is it? What does this mean? And as you mentioned, I think there's been so many advances with technology and even the way that budgets are built, right? So you don't have to, take a paper and pencil on your own calculator and try to come up with this. There are things that are auto-filled, right? And so they will sum it and the formulas are in there. So when you know that, then all you have to do is put in this and that comes out, and the budget that you have is the budget you have. You cannot go over it by 1 penny. And in fact, what will happen is, sometimes you will be rewarded if you come in under. Now, I'm one of those people who's like, use it all, right? Because if you don't use it, you're probably going to lose it. But there are times when you did come in under budget, right? And you're like, wow, I don't know how that happened, but you can trace it back and find out exactly what happened. Like, oh, I see, I didn't, have that guest speaker, or I didn't get that test kit, or, those things.
Oh, absolutely. And again, that comes with being familiar. And I think, if no one gets anything from this conversation or this podcast, is do not be afraid to look at your budget, become familiar with it. Another analogy that's not quite, but that's your home. That's like your home. You want to look in all the rooms in the home. Even though you don't spend a lot of time in certain rooms, you might want to know that you have it.
Yes.
And the budget is very much that way. Walk in, open up your budget. Okay, how much do I have for this? How much do I have for that? And then do as you did. If you see something that doesn't make sense, and what's also important, if you look at your budget and you see something is missing, there's typically a period of time that budget is being created, and you may have made a request for something before it becomes finalized. And if you get the finalized budget and something is missing, it doesn't mean that you'll be able to change it, but I think that's something that you need to address the powers to be and find out. I requested this. I don't see it in my final budget. Could you tell me what happened here? And let them tell you why it was removed or whatever, because you don't want to assume what you submitted is what you were awarded.
Right. Absolutely. Excellent point there.
Yeah. And so again, you do your home, you do the work and you submit something, because typically, in my experience, the budget owners do have a pre-budget meeting with someone, and you walk through the numbers and you submit something. But when the final budget is given back to you, go back to it and put them side by side. This is what I submitted. This is what I got. There will probably be some variances, but there might be something in particular that you were really counting on that's not in your final budget. So you probably should go back to individual and said, hey, I noticed that this wasn't here. Can you give me the story behind it? That's really important. That's really, because often people may think, okay, what I submitted is what I got. And they're moving and operating with that mindset. And then all of a sudden, I have no money and I have 5 months left in the year. Right. So just always compare to, the submission to what the final is.
So one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because again, I know how my faculty can be. They can say, I'm not a budget owner. This doesn't have anything to do with me. And I would strongly recommend that you try to serve on the budget committee, your institutional's budget committee, so that you can get an understanding of the nuances of budget, what happens in the financing department. Go over and meet somebody in that department. It will help you. And if you're thinking about promoting, I would strongly recommend this be a committee that you serve on. Talk to your department chair and see, if that's possible, when you can rotate onto the institutional budget committee. Now, go ahead, Raymond.
No, and the other part of that is one of the reasons why it's so important to serve on that particular committee is because I think a lot of times faculty and perhaps members of the institution don't understand the institutional strategy.
Mm,
And the budget is one of the channels in which the institutional strategy is communicated. So
mm,
if you are part of that budget committee, you will be made aware of the direction that your institution is trying to pursue. So
yeah.
I think that's a really great suggestion.
Yes, yes, and thank you for bringing that out because it is a strategy, right? We often hear about the institutional strat plan and strategic initiatives and these sorts of things, and I just remember thinking, what in the world, right? But in order to make it interesting, you have to go a bit outside of your comfort zone. And maybe you are like, oh, I want to work on the diversity initiative, or oh, I want to work on student management issues. But go over there to the budget section, because I can guarantee you there's not a lot of people beating a path over to the finance office
Not at
or
all.
be on the budget committee, and you will really learn a lot. You will learn a lot.
I agree. I mean, definitely go. And again, we talked about education being a business, and if you are interested in promoting in that business or education, your participation in the budget committee will expose you to those that may have some influence of your promotion, or and so I think that's a wonderful strategy for promotion.
Yes, yes. And so those of you who know me know I'm always talking about a team me and a strategy and networking. And so this is, just as Raymond just mentioned, this is another opportunity for networking and building some allyship in an area that really has a lot of influence over the institution, right? So I think it's a win-win. So Raymond, thank you so much for telling us about this budgeting as it relates to institution of higher ed. But what else are you working on these days?
Well, actually, I've been working as a finance consultant. I'm working with the nonprofit, and particularly working with the organization's controller. And one of the things with the years, I've worked in a lot of industries. I was in higher ed, of course, but I also worked in oil and gas. And early in my career, I did taxes. So so I've been all over the place. But I work with this nonprofit agency, and been working with the controller to help them improve some of their processes and stuff like the month end close. Making sure that they present nice reports for their board, and those kind of things. So that's really what I've been doing lately. And I mean, it's interesting how, because I've worked at such large institutions, you sometimes forget about some of the more mom and pop. I mean, the small, maybe I should say smaller organizations.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
so this has been really fulfilling in a very interesting capacity. Frustrating, let's go there, because you don't realize how many tools you may have when you work for a large institution. And so that becomes your norm. And so then when in this environment now, I'm having to really count on, I think, on my own creativity, innovation, and quite frankly, something that you're doing, coaching skills, because so often people don't know what they don't know. And just because you do know, you don't. And again, I heard someone else talk about emotional intelligence, being self-aware. And this environment has really brought me home to being self-aware. It's like, oh, okay, Raymond, you have worked in places that you've had all these tools. This particular agencies don't have that tools. Work with what they have and help them be the best with what they have.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
yeah.
and quite frankly, the other part that I find is just reinstalling a sense of competence, that sometimes people have. Quite frankly, when people are struggling, they know they're struggling,
Yes.
And they personalize that struggle when, as I'm coaching this person, I'm saying that you are struggling, but there's a reason why you're struggling. So you don't have to personalize it. It's not you.
Yes.
You know, if you had more people, if you had better technology, a lot of this stuff would disappear, but you don't. So
Right.
let's just stay in the now and go, okay, this is what we have, which means that we have to prioritize our time. So, I mean, I digress, but that's kind of what I've been doing lately.
Well, I think it is totally relevant, right? So when we started our conversation, I was telling people, you know, stay tuned, budgeting is important, right? And so often we don't know what we don't know, right?
Right, absolutely.
So working with a coach, working with a finance officer, working with someone who has skills and expertise in the areas that you may not have skills and expertise in, and frankly, just having some support, right? So the whole, again, team me is about, we can't do it all, whether you're a faculty member, whether you're a budget manager, which means you're over a whole department, you know, whether you're a student, whether you're at a nonprofit, we all have these roles that we occupy, and we can't know it all, and we shouldn't even try to know it all. We should reach out and see who we can get to support us in the areas that we just need some support in.
Right, and not feel guilty about needing support. I mean, again, I do some coaching on the side, you know, and that is one of the things with a couple of clients that I have, is that they are not comfortable with the recognition. You need support. It's okay.
Well,
I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it too. It's like, let's step back. You could use some help here.
right.
That's all we're saying. We're not saying that you're not good at what you do. We're not saying this. You could, you know, you could benefit from some assistance.
Yes, and it's interesting because people will, you know, it often requires a reframe, right? Because
oh, that's perfect.
Say, oh, you know, what do I need a coach for? And I'm like, well, you've had coaches all your life, right? You've had people support you, and so maybe it's a different name, but this is what we're doing, right? We're giving you the support, and nobody can do it on their own. Again, you're a faculty member, a department chair, an administrator, you cannot do it all. And we hope that as you continue to listen to this discussion, there's some tidbits that you can take away. So, you know, Raymond, as we wrap up today, what are one or two things that you can leave our listeners with in terms of finance, budgeting, as it relates to being in higher ed?
Number one, if you are a budget owner, I reiterate that you've submitted a budget proposal. Make sure you can compare what you submitted to what you're finally awarded. That, I mean, you have to do that. That's important. And two, the last thing is, if you have a question, ask.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's why I mean,
very simple, but very profound.
Yes.
So we want to reconcile, we want to double check and triple check, because it's not always what you think it is. And then if you're unsure, and even if you are sure, ask the question, because it opens the conversation. Well, thank you so much for your insights today, Raymond. And I look forward to future collaborations, and here's to your continued success.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. And I do look forward to future collaborations. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Once again, I'm Dr. Loren M. Hill with 𝘀𝗵𝗄𝗃, and please feel free to reach out to us.